Good morning. So, thought I'd take a couple minutes to go over my shooting position that I use when shooting field target. Now, I will say I spend more time practicing this position than any other because it's the most common position in field target competition when shooting WFTF class. Now, there's two main variations that you'll see when it comes to sitting positions, one being far more common than the other. The first one, and this is the one that my eldest daughter uses, the forearm of the left hand is braced on the thigh of the left leg, and the inside of the outside of the right forearm is braced on the inside of the right thigh. And it's important that there's as much contact between the forearm and thigh on the left hand as possible to give you as much stability as possible. Now, if you're going for an elevated shot, you might do this, but the problem is there's a lot that's unsupported and the gun's going to move around. So that's a concern. And as a result, you generally don't see this position used very often. But like I said, my oldest daughter uses it and she's had really good results with it. So it doesn't really work for me. So let's talk about the position I'm using. Now, most of the really good WFTF field target shooters that I've seen rest the forearm of the gun off of the knee. And there are a lot of advantages to that. Number one, it's bone support. You're not using muscles on the fore end of the stock, so it takes a variable out. Now you'll see him use a knee pad to isolate the gun from the kneecap. That's important. But generally speaking, they're all resting the forearm of the gun on the knee. And these are some of the best shooters in the US that I've been watching. The other thing I've seen is that generally speaking, most of them try to put this part of the stock just behind the loading port over the knee itself. So let's go ahead and do that. So that's pretty typical. Now you can move the knee further back on the stock, but the problem you run into there is you've changed the pivot point. So any movement back here at the butt end is going to result in even more movement at the muzzle end. So it's best to put your knee as far forward on the gun as it will tolerate. And the vast majority of shooters that I've watched, they're putting their knee right behind the loading port. Now, as far as my right hand or arm is concerned, the outside of my forearm is being braced on the inside of my thigh here to provide support. Again, the knee is supporting the fore end of the gun, and I've got a really nice low center of gravity. It's not way up in the air wobbling around. Again, I don't have it way back like this where the muzzle's going to react a lot to small movements back at the butt. So let me go ahead and take a shot and just watch the muzzle, watch how the gun moves, because that's probably the most important part of this. And I'll kind of talk my way through this shot. So again, getting into position, knee is directly behind the loading port. Right forearm is supported by my thigh. I'm pulling the gun slightly into my shoulder. Now, something to bear in mind. There is no position you're going to use in field target that's going to give you a perfectly still reticle on a target. You're always going to have some movement there, whether you're shooting offhand, kneeling, or sitting. The most stable position, you're still going to have movement. So the thing to bear in mind is stop paying attention to trying to get that reticle to stop. It's not going to happen. The main thing you need to do is work on a position that minimizes that movement. So my reticle is moving throughout the kill zone, but it's staying within the kill zone. So at that point, my goal is to make sure that the trigger releases when it crosses the center of the kill zone. And again, I've talked about this in previous videos, the whole trigger control and squeeze the trigger and it should be a surprise when the gun goes off. In my opinion, that's all bull. It should be a deliberate movement of the trigger blade. You get it into, you get aimed at the target or whatever, and you get your crosshairs to start settling down. You go through the first stage, you get right up against that second stage, and any further pressure, that gun should go off right when you intend it to, more often than not. We're not perfect. Let me do another shot here so you can kind of get a look at that position again. You'll notice the butt is anchored into the socket of my shoulder. Again, a little bit of rearward pull on the gun to bring that butt into the socket of my shoulder. Not too much. And be very certain that you're pulling directly rearward. If you pull off to one side or the other as you're doing that, of course, your shots are going to move from one side to the other. Now, I've tried variations of this position before. One of them was to move the butt of the rifle further down my arm to right around where my bicep was. And the thing that I liked about that position is it brought the gun more across my chest, which gave me more stability. The problem that I've run into with this position is that depending upon the shirt that I'm wearing or jacket that I'm wearing, the butt of the gun would start slipping around. Like t-shirt, that t-shirt will move around on my skin, and as a result, the gun starts moving under recoil. So as a result, I've moved to where that butt is now anchored into my shoulder. But again, the main thing for me is making sure that my knee is directly under the rear of the loading port. I'm anchored into my shoulder, slight rearward pressure into the socket of my arm. Right forearm is resting on my thigh, and pull the trigger. Now, what I'm having difficulty with right now, and that's because I broke my hand recently, my tendons are still a bit inflamed, and as a result, separating the pull of these three fingers against the stock from the pull of the index finger against the trigger has become a little bit of a problem, so I have to pay more attention to that. But for me, this is the position that has worked the best, bar none. Now, I've tried different stocks, I've tried cheek risers, I've tried knee risers or hamsters, and I found the hamsters only benefit me when I'm in my offhand or standing position. If I'm in my kneeling or my sitting position, it tends, in my experience, especially with the Springer, it raises the center of the gravity of the rifle up and makes it more sensitive to hold. Because again, that higher center of gravity, the smallest input is going to make that rifle move even more than running a lower center of gravity like shooting it off your knee. Now, I will say the whole reason I started filming these shooting videos was to be able to basically film myself, go back, look at it, and see what was working, what wasn't. Watch how the gun moved, make sure my position was consistent with each shot. It was mainly a training aid, and I just decided to post them. Now you'll notice when I shift my aim, my position, I'm shifting the base of my body. I'm shifting my feet, I'm shifting my butt. I am not moving my knee around. I don't want to move anything muscular. I want to move my structure. And one trick you can do is once you get in position, get on target, close your eyes or look away, and then go back on target and see where you're aimed. If you're not aimed at the same spot, adjust your position. Now, I will say, my previous position where the butt was further down the arm, I could get 3/8 inch groups at 35-40 yards, and they were beautiful groups, really loved it. But the problem was I couldn't do that consistently. I could do it for maybe 5 shot groups, get really nice tight groups, and then they'd start falling apart as I'd continue on. So maintaining that was becoming a problem. And like I said, a lot of that was just me sweating, the shirt moving around, stuff of that nature. So I moved over to where the butt is now anchored into my armpit. And initially, while the groups weren't quite as small, they were more consistent. I could group within a 1/2 inch at 35-40 yards pretty much every time that way. Now, as I've continued practicing that position, the group sizes have gotten smaller, and I'm still more consistent than I was with every other variations of the position. So that's something to really pay attention to, and probably the best advice I can give you is when trying different positions, don't necessarily look for the smallest group. The smallest group doesn't mean that's the right position. Consistency means it's the right position, because consistency is what's going to matter in that match. If you can knock down every target for the first 5 lanes but then lose it in a match, that doesn't do you any good. So find the position that gives you the most consistency. Practice is what's going to get you the smaller groups in that position. So anyhow, I hope this helps out and kind of explains how it is that I'm using this position and why I'm using this position. Now, one of the things people bring up or may assume is that this position requires the use of your abs quite a bit, which would be a bad thing because, again, you want bone to be supporting the rifle, not muscle. And what you'll notice is when I get into position, this hand wraps around my knee and helps to support my body so that I'm not using my abs to keep myself in position. And as a result, I can hold this position for a while. Now, yeah, I'm using muscles to keep this wrist bent, but once I release my abs, it's the structure of my arm, my left arm, that's supporting me. Anyhow, like I said, hopefully that helps and explains a little bit about why I use the shooting position that I do. If you're going to focus on practicing in any particular position for WFTF field target, it's going to be the sitting position because, like I said, most of your shots are going to be in that position. But if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments section there. I'll do my best to address them. Otherwise, I will let you go. You guys have a good one, and I will catch you later. Bye.